40,000 soldiers, 40,000 voices, 40,000 beating hearts marching across the soil of Burkina Faso. Not in Poland, not in NATO, but right here, in Africa's own house. For years, they told us Africa was weak. For years, they said we could not defend ourselves. Wait for help, they said. Depend on others, and they preached. But now, look, a young Captain Ibrahim Traoré has stood up and said, no more waiting, no more begging. We will guard our land with our own hands. Church, do you feel the weight of that moment? This is not just politics. This is prophecy unfolding. When Europe moves armies, they call it strategy. When Africa rises, they call it danger. But whose danger? Whose fear? This moment is larger than uniforms. It is about dignity reclaimed, sovereignty declared, and hope reborn. Before we dive deeper, I need you to subscribe. Yes, right now, because Africa's story must not be hidden. It must ring out like a bell across your feed. And tell me, family, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Let us see how far this fire of hope burns. 40,000 men and women in uniform. Imagine that sight. Columns of soldiers stretching further than the eye can see. Dust rising from their boots. Rifles slung across their shoulders. Flags of Burkina Faso fluttering against the Sahel sun. This is not a drill, not a parade. This is the largest mobilization in the nation's modern history. And it did not come from Paris, nor Washington, nor Brussels. It came from a young African captain named Ibrahim Traoré, a man who chose courage over consent from foreign capitals. Why 40,000? Why now? The official word is simple: to seal the northern border, to stop militants crossing back and forth with guns and gold, burning villages and breaking families. For too long, that border has been a wound, bleeding fear into every home. Traoré's answer was not words, it was presence. He planted soldiers where once only bandits stood. And if you want to know what that means, don't ask the analysts. Ask the teacher in Kaya who used to dismiss his students early because gunfire echoed outside the schoolyard. Weeks after deployment, he said those same children walked to class without glancing over their shoulders. Ask the farmer in the Sahel whose fields were burned 3 years in a row. When he saw soldiers guarding the road, he said, "Now I can plant again, not in fear, but in faith." Church, do you see what this is? It is not simply military, it is moral. It is a declaration that the people of Burkina Faso have the right to sleep through the night without hearing gunshots in the dark. It is a message that sovereignty is not a gift from abroad, but a choice made at home. Yet the story is not just about those who stay safe behind soldiers. It is about the soldiers themselves. Young men from villages with only sandals on their feet, students still carrying their books in their backpacks, fathers with calloused hands from farming now holding rifles to guard the same soil they once tilled. Some say 40,000 is just a number, but in reality it is 40,000 stories, 40,000 sacrifices, 40,000 prayers rising up for protection. This mobilization shakes assumptions across the globe, because the world is used to seeing foreign troops on African ground, French in Mali, Americans in Niger, blue helmets in Congo. But now Africa itself stands up, and suddenly headlines tremble. When NATO moves, it is necessary defense. When Traoré moves, it is cause for concern. But family, whose concern are we really talking about? Even the land feels different when defended by its own. A shopkeeper in Dori told a reporter he once closed before sunset, fearing bandits after dark. Weeks after deployment, he kept his stall open past midnight, serving tea to soldiers and neighbors alike. That is not geopolitics. That is community reborn. But let us not romanticize too quickly. 40,000 is also a risk. It is resources stretched thin. It is young lives placed on the line. It is a gamble that presence can outlast fear. Yet in that gamble lies something greater than policy: legitimacy. Because when a state defends its people with its own sons and daughters, trust begins to take root. And that trust, once planted, can grow into something that no foreign army, no outside headline can easily uproot. But here's the question that lingers. Family, is this mobilization enough to change the future? Or is it only the beginning of a battle far greater than the borders of Burkina Faso? Brothers and sisters, if the deployment itself was historic, then what followed was nothing short of a revelation. For when Ibrahim Traoré called for recruits, he did not summon mercenaries. He did not hire outsiders. He opened the doors of the nation, and the people came running. Picture the scene in Ouagadougou. Long before the sun rose, men lined the streets. Farmers walked in from their villages, sandals on their feet, dust on their clothes, but fire in their eyes. Students carried backpacks still filled with books, ready to exchange lessons of theory for lessons of survival. Young men clutched their old school certificates, desperate to prove their age so they could enlist. Stadiums overflowed. Officials were astonished. They expected hundreds, maybe thousands. Instead, tens of thousands raised their hands, not for money, for there was little to offer, but for dignity. Church, this is the paradox. When America sees young men enlist, they call it patriotism. When Africans do the same, headlines warn of militarization. Yet the spirit of the people cannot be measured in headlines. Armies can be trained, uniforms can be stitched, but legitimacy, true legitimacy, cannot be borrowed. It must be born from within. And on that day, it was born anew. I remember the story of a father in Bobo Dioulasso. He watched his son put on a uniform for the very first time. Tears welled up in his eyes. But instead of fear, he whispered, "At least now my son fights for us, not for them." That single line carries more weight than 1,000 policy papers. It tells us why thousands volunteered, why stadiums overflowed, why even the poorest walked miles just to sign their names. Because this was not seen as an order from above, but a choice from within. And yet, while the streets filled with volunteers, the halls of power across West Africa filled with silence. ECOWAS, usually quick to condemn or threaten, avoided direct words. France, once omnipresent in Burkina Faso's affairs, was reduced to whispers and unnamed concerns. Neighboring governments found themselves torn, some quietly admiring this display of sovereignty, others fearing that such mobilization could spill across their own borders. But church, let me ask, is it not strange? When Poland mobilized almost the same number of troops just weeks earlier, Western newspapers praised the act as defensive and necessary. But when Traoré mobilized 40,000 inside his own borders, suddenly the words shifted. Authoritarian, cause for concern. Why the double standard? Why the fear? The truth is simple. The real fear is not rifles in the hands of Africans. The real fear is sovereignty in the hearts of Africans. Because an army built on volunteers is more than a fighting force. It is a statement to the world. We no longer beg, we no longer borrow, we stand. But this new spirit carries tension, for with every new recruit, hope rises, but so too does risk. Risk of escalation, risk of confrontation, risk that international powers might act to undermine what they cannot control. Still, listen closely to the heartbeat of the people. A young student once dreamed of leaving for Europe, but when he heard the call, he chose instead to stay and enlist. Why? Because he said, "If my village does not survive, what use is my degree?" That is not desperation, that is dignity, that is destiny. So here we stand at a turning point. On one side, a nation swelling with volunteers, a leader daring to act, and a people rediscovering their pride. On the other side, a region holding its breath. Foreign powers shifting uneasily in their seats, and newspapers trying to rewrite the meaning of African courage. And the question grows heavier. Is this wave of mobilization the dawn of a new sovereignty, or the spark of a storm yet to come? Family, when 40,000 soldiers march, the echo does not stop at the border. It rolls through the markets, the schools, the farms, and yes, even the minds of Burkina Faso. Because this mobilization was not only about security, it was about sovereignty made visible. For decades, foreign soldiers guarded Africa's wealth. In Niger, French troops stood watch over uranium, and Western analysts called it strategic partnership. But when Ibrahim Traoré sent his own people to guard Burkina Faso's gold, those same voices called it nationalism and isolation. Do you see the double standard? When outsiders protect resources, it is strategy. When Africans protect resources, it is suspicion. But let us not speak in abstractions. Let us hear from the miner outside Ouagadougou who said, "For the first time, maybe this gold will touch our children's future." Those words carry more truth than any report from Paris or Washington, because to him, soldiers are not just rifles in uniform. They are shields standing between his labor and the trucks that once carried wealth away in the dead of night. And in the villages, the changes are small but sacred. A shopkeeper in the border town of Dori said he once closed before sunset, fearing bandits who ruled the roads after dark. Weeks after deployment, he kept his stall open past midnight, pouring tea for soldiers and neighbors. That simple act transformed fear into fellowship, survival into community. A mother in the Sahel once hid her children under the bed whenever gunfire cracked in the distance. After the deployment, she said the only sound at night was crickets. That silence was not emptiness, it was dignity. It was proof that security is not measured in speeches, but in sleep. Church, listen to me. This is the hidden power that worries the world. Not rifles, not uniforms, but the possibility that people begin to trust their own institutions. Because when trust grows, dependency dies. And when dependency dies, the old balance of power shifts, yet the consequences ripple further. Investors whisper that militarization scares away business, but history teaches the opposite. Stability, even if secured by soldiers, attracts buyers who crave predictability. The real gamble is not whether troops frighten investors. The real gamble is whether troops force investors to negotiate on Africa's terms. And beneath the headlines, a deeper transformation stirs. Young men who once dreamed of migration now dream of defending their homes. Farmers who once abandoned fields now return with seed in hand. Children who once feared the road to school now walk freely. These are not statistics. These are signs of a nation redefining normal life. But let us not ignore the tension. Mobilization carries cost. Feeding, arming, and supporting 40,000 troops is no small burden for one of the poorest nations on earth. Some warn this strain may prove unsustainable. Others warn of overreach, that concentrating power in the hands of one young leader risks repeating old mistakes. And yet, family, let us ask the greater question, which is more destabilizing? Empty villages abandoned to militants, or citizens standing beside a state that finally defends them? Which is more dangerous, a people who depend on outsiders, or a people who believe in themselves? So now I turn to you. Tell me in the comments, do you believe sovereignty is secured by force of arms, or by the force of trust between people and their leaders? Because the world is watching. Some see danger, some see dignity. But what matters most is not what they see. It is what Burkina Faso themselves feel when they walk to school, when they plant their fields, when they sleep through the night. And in that feeling lies the next question. Will this trust endure, or will it be tested by the silence of neighbors and the suspicion of foreign powers? Brothers and sisters, let us lift our eyes beyond Burkina Faso for a moment. Let us see how the world reacts when Africa moves with courage. The United States today keeps military bases in more than 80 nations. France, even after being shown the door in Ouagadougou, still stations troops across West Africa. NATO expands its deployments after every crisis, and the newspapers call it necessary, defensive, strategic. But when 40,000 Burkina Faso march within their own borders, the words change. Suddenly it is authoritarian. Suddenly it is militarization. Suddenly it is cause for concern. Family, ask yourself, concern for whom? Concern for the people of Burkina Faso, who now sleep through the night? Or concern for the powers that once dictated who could guard Africa's gold? Here lies the double standard written plain. When NATO expands, it is protection. When Africa rises, it is suspicion. Yet the louder the criticism abroad, the stronger the unity at home. For people are people everywhere. Americans, Africans, Europeans. We all know the instinct. You may criticize your own family in private, but when a stranger insults them, suddenly you stand taller, you speak louder, you close ranks. That is what we see now in Burkina Faso. A shopkeeper in Ouagadougou hung a picture of Traoré in his window after reading a Western article that called the mobilization reckless. When asked why, he said, "If they hate it so much, maybe it means he is doing something right. That, my family, is not blind loyalty. That is pride born in the face of outside scorn. And here is the irony. The more foreign headlines attack Traoré, the more local citizens defend him. The more analysts in Washington raise their eyebrows, the more volunteers line up in Ouagadougou. Opposition, instead of weakening him, strengthens him. So now the silence of ECOWAS and the suspicion of Paris hang in the air. Neighbors hold their breath, foreign powers shuffle uneasily, and the question grows heavier. Will Burkina Faso's 40,000 become a wall that isolates the nation, or a symbol that inspires the continent? Family, what lies ahead for Burkina Faso? What lies ahead for Africa? 40,000 troops on the border is not the end of the story. It is the opening chapter of a new book, a book written in the dust of the Sahel and the hearts of the people. Some say this is courage, others whisper it is overreach, but history does not record whispers, it records results. If this mobilization holds, if villages remain safe, if mines feed schools instead of offshore accounts, then a new model may emerge, an Africa that no longer waits for permission to protect itself. And if Burkina Faso succeeds, neighbors will notice. From Mali to Niger, from Ghana to Senegal, leaders will be forced to ask, why not us? Why not now? But with hope comes risk. Feeding, clothing, and arming 40,000 is no small task for one of the poorest nations on earth. Sanctions may come. Aid may be cut. Pressure from Paris, Washington, or Brussels may tighten. And yet, remember this, the strongest chains are not always around the neck. Sometimes they are around the mind. If the people of Burkina Faso have broken the habit of dependency, then no sanction can undo that freedom. Still, the path is steep. Mobilization may inspire unity today, but will it last tomorrow? Can one young captain bear the weight of expectation from millions? Can the flame of hope survive the winds of international suspicion? Church, hear me now. The story of Ibrahim Traoré is not simply about a soldier, or a state, or even a continent. It is about the eternal struggle between dependency and dignity, between silence and sovereignty. And the final question, the one history itself will ask, is this: will Burkina Faso's 40,000 be remembered as a wall that protected a fragile land, or as the first stones in a foundation for a stronger Africa? Family, let us pause and look again at the picture before us. 40,000 soldiers, not under a foreign flag, not marching for another nation's interest, but standing in the dust of Burkina Faso for their own people. This is not simply deployment. This is dignity dressed in uniform. For too long, the world told Africa, you cannot. For too long, headlines painted the continent as weak, fragile, dependent. But now a young leader named Ibrahim Traoré has dared to act. And in his action, he has written a new sermon for this generation. Sovereignty is not begged for, it is lived. This is why Ibrahim Traoré news does not fade after one headline. Because what he represents is larger than one captain, larger than one country. He represents the awakening of a people who refuse to let fear define their nights or foreign powers define their future. And to you, watching across America, across the diaspora, across Africa itself, hear me. The question is no longer whether Africa can defend itself. The question is whether the world is ready to accept an Africa that does. So let us ask together, will these 40,000 be remembered as a wall of isolation, or as the beginning of a bridge toward African pride and self-determination? Will they be remembered as force alone, or as trust reborn between a people and their state? Before you leave, I urge you, subscribe to this channel, share this message, let it ring out like a church bell. Do not let Africa's voice be buried beneath someone else's headline. And tell me in the comments, what do you believe true sovereignty means? Is it guarded by soldiers, or grown in the trust between leaders and people? Because make no mistake, family, this moment is history. And when tomorrow's children ask what it felt like to see Africa rise, may you answer, I was there, I saw it, I believed. This is not the end of the story. This is just the beginning, and the world will keep searching Burkina Faso news. The world will keep following Ibrahim Traoré news. because Africa has risen and the voice of dignity will not be silenced.